So the Democracy Network works to strengthen the relationships and connections between organizations, projects, and individuals working to build a healthier democracy in the UK. The network is open to all of those working in and around issues of democracy, power, and voice in the UK, and providing you with the resources, information, and collaboration opportunities to take your work to the next level. Anti-Party is a pro-democracy movement born from the Partygate scandal, looking to transcend the two-party system by applying collective intelligence for systems change. My name is Bella Roberts. I'm the founder of Anti-Party, and I'm pleased to introduce Sammy McKinney, our main speaker for today. Sammy is a recent MSc graduate from Edinburgh Futures Institute, where he specialised in his research on the intersections of deliberative democracy and artificial intelligence. He's now working as a democracy practitioner and AI governance researcher, and his research has included supporting participatory processes on the Just Transition Plan in Scotland, curating learning materials for a deliberative process on the governance of generative AI, and facilitating courses on AI governance. Sammy will be sharing his findings from his master's thesis, Integrating Artificial Intelligence into Citizens Assemblies, the benefits, concerns, and future pathways. In his thesis, Sammy mapped out 17 ways that AI could be used within Citizens Assemblies and analysed the democratic, institutional, and ethical implications of AI integration. In doing so, his project explores whether AI applications can address real-world challenges facing Citizens Assemblies today and the broader political, theoretical, and economic questions that arise from AI integration, such as AI's ability to scale deliberative processes. His project aims to provide actionable insights to democracy practitioners interested in experimenting with AI applications. So hopefully there'll be a lot of key practical implementable takeaways from today. And before we dive in, I just want to encourage everyone to share their thoughts, comments, and questions in the chat box throughout, as we intend for the discussion to be as engaging and interactive as possible. There is dedicated time at the end to raise your hand for questions to the group, where we will launch into a much more lively discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Sammy. Thank you, Sammy.
Thank you, Bella. I'm just going to try and... Am I able to get access to share my screen, James? It says it's disabled at the moment.
You should be co-host now.
Yeah, it's still not coming through. Yeah, got it now. Cool. Hopefully you can all see this. All right, is that okay? Cool. Yeah, thank you, Belle, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be sharing my research on this topic with you all. Lovely to see many familiar faces, many new faces, and I hope there'll be something in this to take away for everyone. So yeah, I'm going to be discussing the integration of AI into Citizens Assemblies, with a particular focus on the benefits, limitations, and future pathways that lie at the intersection of these two burgeoning fields. So there are two guiding questions for my project. Firstly, how can AI be integrated into Citizens Assemblies? And here I'm understanding Citizens Assemblies as randomly selected group of citizens who are brought together to learn about and reason on issues of common concern. So this first question is more descriptive in nature. I was looking at citizen assemblies throughout their entire life cycle and trying to map out key applications of AI. And secondly, I was looking at to what extent is AI integration into citizens assemblies desirable. So this was the more normative edge of my exploration, looking at things like the ethical implications, the democratic implications, and the institutional implications for AI integration. So why did I choose to spend time researching this? Firstly, my attention was really caught by the advancements that had happened in the last few months in large language models, and seeing the various applications that there are made me think about how that could be applied to deliberative and participatory processes. Also, with citizens assemblies becoming more common, but there not being any detailed analysis of the intersections of these two fields, I thought this really warranted a closer investigation. Thirdly, with increasing interest across various actors, so we heard Flynn in his presentation last week discussing interest that he has and other practitioners have in exploring this, as well as other academics who have started working on it, and also corporations, for example, OpenAI's recent democratic input into AI grants was encouraging people to explore the way that AI could be innovative within the process. And lastly, coming from a political theory background, I was very interested in exploring the way in which AI integration could intersect with relevant questions that exist within deliberative democracy, such as the scalability of citizen participation processes. So roughly, my methodology was one grounded in applied political theorizing. So I wasn't doing any empirical research into applications yet, but rather looking to map and normatively explore the intersections here. This was informed by key informant interviews. So I spoke with 4 expert democratic innovators who all have experience within Citizens Assemblies, who also provided their ideas and thoughts surrounding AI integration. And I also used the Global Citizens Assembly on the climate and ecological crisis throughout as a case study to draw on. So I may be referring to that here or there. Okay, so I'm hoping that this will be like a main takeaway from my research here. So here is an analytical framework that seeks to provide a means for assessing the desirability of AI integration into citizens' assemblies. So if you think about that second question I had, to what extent is AI integration into citizens' assemblies desirable? This is a framework that I provided to help answer this question. This is adapted from some of Graham Smith's work, and it has 2 key dimensions: democratic goods and institutional goods. So the reason that we should care about democratic goods is because citizen assemblies are democratic processes. They seek to embody specific kinds of ideals. And so we need to be attentive to the way in which AI integration might affect these given ideals. And there are fourfold democratic goods that I consider. So inclusiveness. So does AI help promote inclusion of different groups within citizens' assemblies? Popular control. Does AI help citizens have influence over the process and have direct policy impact? Consider judgment. Does AI integration help citizens reach thoughtful conclusions? And transparency. Does AI help citizens understand the process, understand how it is operating, and how the process is unfolding? If AI integration has the capacity to enhance opposed to hinder these democratic goods, then I would suggest that would be a tick in the desirability box in terms of AI integration. And the second dimension is institutional goods. So this moves our attention away from the more internal characteristics of citizen assemblies towards their role within political systems and their feasibility in terms of institutionalization and effectiveness. So the institutional goods are twofold. Firstly, efficiency. So does AI reduce the social and economic costs of citizens' assemblies? And secondly, does AI help citizen assemblies incorporate higher levels of citizen participation and help citizen assemblies scale to transnational or global levels? Again, if this is something that AI applications are capable of supporting, then again, that's a tick in the desirability box for AI integration. So what I'm now going to do is, in my dissertation, I applied this framework to 17 different AI applications. I've picked out 6 that I'll talk about in detail and display how I applied this framework. And then I'll say a few words briefly about the other applications. But yeah, this will be worth people potentially keeping in mind as you look to maybe experiment, explore, evaluate the integration of AI into citizens' assemblies. You could keep this framework in mind and ask questions about how does it affect the democratic quality? How does it affect the institutional capacity? And you can do so by thinking about how it affects these specific goods. Okay, so first application to discuss is AI translation. So translation is essential to many citizens' assemblies, particularly as they scale to transnational or global levels. There are a number of benefits, the main ones being increased efficiency and scalability. So AI translation is far cheaper than human translation, and it could also be scaled up much easier than human translation could be, given that there are a finite number of human translators who could be operating within citizens' assemblies. The main concerns with AI translation is that it's not so effective at translating so-called low-resource languages. So these are languages for which there is limited amount of online text data or data on the whole that can be used to train AI models. So this would apply to local languages that don't have many speakers. AI models are not so effective at translating into and out of these languages. And the concern here is that it could lead to inequalities arising within the group, and it could undermine inclusiveness, which is one of the important democratic dimensions that I mentioned in my framework. So a promising pathway, I would suggest, is to continue experimenting more with AI translation. There really are incredible efficiency and scalability benefits, but also we need to remain attuned to the variation in quality across different languages. And we might need to think about what hybrid possibilities we might need to integrate here. So for example, for languages that are really low resource, then we would need to use human translation alongside it. So AI facilitation. Facilitators play an absolutely key role in citizens' assemblies, and there have been groups now starting to explore the automation of facilitation. Again, the key benefits here seem to be scalability and efficiency, so on the institutional side. So for example, a recent use of Stanford's online deliberation platform, which has AI facilitation integrated into it, would have required 500 human moderators operating in 19 different languages, which is just logistically would be extremely challenging, a bit of a nightmare, and it would also be very expensive, whereas AI facilitation can be applied at scale in a much more effective way. However, the concern here is that AI is unlikely to be as effective at mitigating inequalities, harboring trust, and being sensitive to nuances in human communication compared to trained and skilled human facilitators. Facilitation, I would suggest, is quite a human craft, a human art form, one that is essential to promoting inclusiveness within a group, to promoting high levels of deliberative quality. And without the ability to detect nuances in communication, without the ability to necessarily facilitate trust as well as a human can, I don't think that an AI would be as good as a human facilitator. So there are some promising pathways here. I think that personally, I would love to continue to see experimentation with AI facilitation, and also the exploration of hybrid possibilities. So human facilitators supporting an AI system. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on. Cool. AI aggregation. So currently, human facilitators or assembly staff will take the huge amounts of input that is gathered from across deliberation groups within a citizens' assembly, and this will then be synthesized into one output. This really faces a problem of scale in that it'll be very difficult for humans to grapple with very large groups of people, contributing lots of different information, whereas AI systems are more capable to deal with and grapple with lots of data. So again, the key benefit here is increased scalability. Important concerns would be hallucinations, so errors within the AI aggregation, and also biases rooted in the AI system's approach to the aggregation, and also limited transparency. So there are ways that have been developed for human facilitators to be able to document how they've aggregated output throughout the process, whereas it could be difficult using a black boxed AI system that is opaque. How can we get access to understand how that process has actually how it's happened? And so again, on the democratic side, there are concerns here. I think that this is something that we'll definitely see in the future, AI aggregation, and I think it would be very interesting to see more experimentation that compares AI aggregation with human aggregation, and also to address these concerns to ensure that participant feedback is always integrated in to the aggregated output to check for errors and also increase the transparency. Another application is using AI to cluster public input. So typically during the agenda setting phase of citizen assemblies and during the process itself, there is not a huge amount of scope for the wider public to provide input to the process. And this has often been a point of criticism against citizen assemblies, that it's only the small group of people who are randomly selected that can contribute. And so there are different ways in which you could use online platforms to gather public input, say during the agenda setting phase, by asking, oh, well, like what type of topic would the public like a citizen assembly to be held on, or gathering perspectives on that given topic. And when the public were to provide input, you could then use an AI system to cluster and categorize the responses in a similar way to Flynn showed us last week in using Polis and how it clustered the different perspectives. So this comes with many benefits, including increased inclusion to the process and also popular control, disseminating the influence and control to the wider public and not just decision makers who are instituting the process. A key concern with this would be self-selection bias. So we know that participation in these types of processes track with specific attributes. Being well educated, being older, things like this. So that would be something to keep in mind, because we wouldn't want this type of approach to actually, in a way, entrench like privileged positions, maybe. So we need to be attentive to that kind of concern with self-selection bias. I think that there are definitely promising pathways here to experiment with integrating tools such as Polis into Citizens Assemblies. And this is some work, I think, of the Computational Democracy Project have started mapping ways that this could be done, and also taking steps to try to close the participation gap whenever experiments like this are actually ran. So this could include something as simple as like the communication, trying to communicate widely about the use of this kind of crowdsourcing. Okay, so another application is AI generating consensus statements. So AI models have already been shown to be able to propose statements that can garner consensus in a group containing diverse viewpoints. This could be helpful within a deliberative process where you're trying to find common ground that exists between people with different views. And it could be helpful for enhancing considered judgment by introducing high potential, high impact ideas, and also for the efficiency of the process, in that it could speed up the deliberation potentially. There are often times during deliberative processes where they're short of time, so this is an application that could be beneficial. However, there are definitely important concerns with this. The first being too much influence being given to machine-generated ideas. And this really speaks to the democratic good of popular control. So in what way could this actually undermine the group having popular control? In what way might it actually move the control towards the people who have created the AI model, who are inevitably going to be unrepresentative of the group itself? And also the second being problematic idea generation. So is it possible in using AI in this way that could, say, generate populist statements that could garner widespread support, things like this? So we'd have to be aware of that concern as well. This one is an interesting application. It will be interesting to see more experimentation with it. I think it will definitely be important to maintain human oversight to try to avoid this problematic idea generation, and also making sure that if an AI generated statement was ever used, it was really subject to the critical deliberation of the group. And in doing so, it was kind of the popular control was always reclaimed by the group itself. This is the last set of applications that I'll talk about in detail. So AI applications in the learning phase. There are a number here. I'll discuss two. So could AI be used to present? AI could be used to present information in diverse formats, such as audio, simplified text, or visuals. And this could be helpful for accommodating different learning styles, for example. And it could also be used to provide information on demand or on tap. And these kind of applications come with many benefits. For example, presenting information in diverse formats would be important for accommodating neurodiversity, accommodating different learning abilities, different learning styles, and thereby make the process more inclusive. Whereas information on demand could be helpful enhancing the scalability and efficiency of the process. It's often the case that citizens' assemblies might not have access to the necessary expertise to answer questions that the citizens would like to hear answers to. And so using language models could be a way to get some initial draft content surrounding that question that could then be verified and checked and then integrated back into the assembly. And this could be a way to decrease the cost of the process and increase their scalability. The main concerns, again, surround bias and hallucinations, particularly in the learning phase. It would be very important not to integrate information errors through hallucinations, and to ensure that the material is nuanced and is not biased towards a specific perspective. So promising paths here, I think, include experimenting with AI within the learning phase, maintaining human oversight of the output so that additional nuance context could be added. We could also explore integrating critical engagement sessions for citizens into the Citizens Assembly process. So this could look something like informing participants, if they're going to be engaging a lot with AI content or AI systems, about the limitations of the AI systems, how they will possess biases and how they will have information errors. And also potentially some information on how they might want to use prompt engineering effectively. And then that last aspect would be fine-tuning AI models for specific deliberative processes in order to make them more accurate, in order to train them on, say, a diverse set of information, so that that bias would also be limited, hopefully. Okay, so that was like, what you saw there was like kind of applying application of my framework to six applications I think are particularly interesting. But this is the kind of higher level mapping that I did of AI applications in Citizens Assemblies. Some of these are applications that have already been used. Some are ones others have discussed. I've tried to synthesize this into this table you see, and let it span over the entire life cycle of Citizens Assemblies. So I won't say too much about the ones that I've not covered yet, because I want to make sure to leave some time for discussion at the end. But I did apply the framework to each of these. And so just to quickly mention, so selection algorithms during recruitment, chatbots for basic communication, and also practitioners using large language models to understand debates are all applications I considered. Within the learning phase, I considered using large language models to support with question generation. So the idea here being that it's good for citizens to have the opportunity to challenge and question speakers on the nods provision, and large language models could support them in generating questions. Within the deliberation phase, I explored the measuring of deliberative quality, using AI systems to play devil's advocate, and visualizing summaries within deliberations. So after a deliberation session has been run, using an AI model to summarize and visualize the key arguments, key points of discussion that have come out during that deliberation. And then during the follow-up phase, you can use AI systems to help with communicating output with the public. This could be to make it more tailored, put into different formats, and also with tracking impact. So often you'll have the recommendations that will be passed on to the government, and the government will respond, and you could potentially use language models to help with identifying where things have shifted in this process. How has it been that the recommendations have actually gone on to affect policy? Okay, so far I've applied two main metrics of evaluation to these applications. So I've thought about the democratic and institutional implications, but we must also be attuned to another dimension here, which is the ethical implications of AI integration. So can AI be integrated in a way that maintains the ethical integrity of citizens' assemblies? And if so, then again, just like promoting democratic goods and promoting institutional capacity, this is like a good indication of the desirability of AI integration. I think there are a number of important ethical concerns. I'll raise three just now. The first being privacy. So how can we ensure the privacy of citizens is upheld with AI integration? So this directs our attention to questions about what data is stored and how it is used. Secondly, imposition. So how can we ensure that AI does not become an off-the-shelf tool that's not adapted to local context? How can we ensure that it's used in a way that is actually suitable? And thirdly, concerns bias. So how can we mitigate AI perpetuating harmful biases, discrimination, or stereotypes within citizens' assemblies? I think for each of these, there are important steps that can be taken for ethical navigation. Concerning privacy, there are ethical data governance frameworks that could be drawn on. So for example, making sure that there's always informed consent, making sure that citizens can have control over their data. You could also explore things like data minimization, so ensuring that only data that is necessary is actually stored, and also data anonymization, so making sure that all data that's stored cannot be traced back to individual participants. Concerning imposition, an interesting way to navigate this would be co-designing processes with participants, so to actually get an indication from participants themselves as to how they would like to use AI models, if they think that it would be something they would be interested in, so that it's not being imposed from above. And lastly, bias. So here, an interesting thing we can do is test systems for bias. Unlike, I guess, human facilitators and experts, we can actually run tests on the AI systems for the bias they contain. We can maintain a human in the loop where possible to kind of try to nuance material away from being biased, and also models can be fine-tuned to become less biased as well. Okay, so far I have discussed 17 or raised 17 AI applications and analyzed many of them according to their democratic and institutional implications. We've analyzed the ethical concerns, or some of the ethical concerns that arise, and the way they could be mitigated. So now I'm just going to start trying to bring this together. So to what extent is AI integration desirable? The conclusion that I came to is that AI integration into citizen assemblies can enhance the democratic quality and the institutional capacity of citizen assemblies without undermining their ethical integrity, if necessary steps are taken to mitigate the challenges that arise from AI integration. So let me break this down. So we saw the way in which various applications can enhance the democratic quality of citizen assemblies. We saw how they could be helpful for promoting considered judgment, popular control, inclusiveness. And we've also seen how various applications such as translation facilitation are helpful for enhancing the institutional capacity. And we also saw how the ethical integrity of the process can be upheld. But what's important as well is that there are various ways in which AI integration could pose problems to democratic quality, and it could pose problems to the ethical integrity. So that's why there need to be necessary steps that are taken to mitigate the challenges that arise. And such steps could include maintaining human oversight, drawing on ethical data governance frameworks, co-designing process with participants, and exploring hybrid possibilities where there is AI systems used, but alongside humans to ensure that the democratic quality and ethical integrity are upheld. So a few concluding thoughts before opening up for a discussion. I think, well, I know there's lots more research required in this area. So although I've mentioned quite a lot of applications today, there are many more that could be explored. I think it's really only scraping the surface of the possibilities here. It would also benefit a lot more from empirical testing surrounding these applications. So for example, how does AI aggregation compare to human aggregation? Or how does AI facilitation, what impact does AI facilitation have relative to human facilitation on group dynamics, for example? And also there are many lines of theoretical inquiry here as well. So for example, when I was talking about AI generating consensus statements, I think there needs to be a lot of theoretical work surrounding the extent to which that might be problematic in terms of undermining popular control. It might be giving too much influence to machine-generated ideas. I'd also say that we need to proceed collaboratively and with caution. A concern I have could be that AI integration could exacerbate tendencies of commercialization or homogenization within citizens' assemblies. And it would be much preferable if we could find a way to navigate this in a way the best practice is always shared, where there's transparency, where the community can work together to grapple with these challenging questions. And also need to proceed with caution. And in particular, I'm thinking about here how whilst there is great potential, there are also many steps that we need to take to make sure to navigate and mitigate the harms that could arise, or the challenges that can arise with AI integration. So yeah, final point, succeeding could be very important for the future of democratic innovations, and by extension, the future of governance generally. So we've seen trends in the increasing number of citizen assemblies that are happening, and if AI could play a role, in continuing to enhance their democratic quality, continuing to make them more institutionally feasible and viable, all in a way that is ethical, then this could be very powerful for continuing to institutionalize these processes in the future, and enabling us to find better ways to address the many challenges that humanity are currently facing. So yeah, I've got some references there, but that is my presentation, and I really look forward to hearing people's thoughts on this. I'd love to hear if people have any other concerns that I've not spoken about, any thoughts on applications that they have that seem high impact, or any questions for me on this as well. Would be grand.
Thanks so much, Sammy. So much to unpack there, and sounds like a really in depth. I mean, 17 aspects. I don't know how you managed to cover all that, but yeah, it's really interesting. You know, obviously talk about the challenges implementing AI, and then you sort of think, do the benefits outweigh those challenges? And out of the 17, you know, are there ones that were more pressing or more important that, you know, if you could prioritize or rank them in any way? Lots of questions. So the chat is actually popping off mainly around the topic on AI, on an AI facilitator. There's talk about the Stanford experiment, although saying it's fairly rudimentary, only prompting people to speak if they've been silent or stop speaking. It was also mentioned that those who have actually used that Stanford platform, there was feedback that a human moderator would have provided more bespoke or relevant prompts. And I think you did mention that, you know, with human in the loop. And Tim here mentioned, that they made use of AI transcription and summarization of expert inputs in the People's Panel on AI. There's a link there if anyone wants to check that out going forwards. But yeah, and that provided aid memoirs of what they had heard, although with caveats that they were roughly equivalent to human note-taking. So again, not very maybe clear advantages so far of the benefits of these AI potential features. But as you know, as we all know, it's all very it's still very early days. So I think we've got a few questions already. Artem, would you like to go ahead? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Bella. And thank you, Sammy. Great presentation. Really, really interesting for myself. As someone who's building a language model powered deliberation tool. And I just wanted to ask you if you had a chance to talk to anyone who is actually organizing the citizen assemblies, and if you have any knowledge or data about the most painful, like what pains do they have? Like what problems do they think are the most important to solve with AI, or could be the most what applications could be the most impactful for those who actually organize the citizen assemblies? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I did have the opportunity to talk to practitioners who work in delivering citizens assemblies as part of this research. Um, to be honest, the one that came up again and again as being of interest was this function of aggregation, actually. Whilst practitioners were interested in exploring applications throughout, there was kind of a common interest, I think, in aggregation and having that role of synthesizing information across groups. So I would say that's an interesting one. What I did as part a lot of this research was building off of a recent evaluation that had come out from the Global Citizens Assembly that was ran last year, and basically highlighting pain points that had come up in that process and thinking about how these applications could potentially help address them. And so, yeah, I would say that AI aggregation would probably be a main one to consider there.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it sounds like aggregation, scalability, it sounds like that's kind of the initial huge influence that they could have involving more people, but does that increase legitimacy? That's another question. Tim, you got your hand up. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, so I guess a reflection from this people's planning work we did last year, where we were using AI tools to add things we couldn't have otherwise done. And I think as a starting point, like people were asking for, can we have a transcript of what was said yesterday? Without AI tools, we'd have just had to say, no, we've got no resource to do that. The ability to, I think, was additive. So I think there's something important in frameworks of thinking, what does AI do that's additive, and where are we using it to replace other things? And I think then the question on that kind of replacement of, aggregation is a fundamental part of a citizens assembly process. It has to happen anyway. Did you look at the particular affordances of large language models that create some, I've got some quite deep concerns about their properties, that large language models are trained on existing text, have an inherent kind of, in a way, conservative or evening out bias to them. And a particular, different models obviously are different, but the tendency of a large language model will be to treat some topics better than others, to even out problems, to always try and be confident when there might be uncertainty, and whether you've analysed any of those properties and what those do in sort of dialogue.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So yeah, definitely share the concerns about language models. So yeah, the first thing that came into my mind was an application that I didn't actually go into detail on in the talk, but was raised by a couple of the practitioners that I spoke to, was the idea of actually using large language models themselves to help them in designing and preparing citizens assembly processes. So practitioners don't tend to be experts in the area that they're convening a process in. And so they could use language models to get to map out the debates, to identify key stakeholders, this kind of thing, and that could be helpful for them. But a concern here, and this was raised by one of my interviewees, was that when they were developing the Global Citizen Assembly on the climate, for example, they had to develop all kinds of new innovative processes, and they had to think about who to include. And for the first time, I think, they actually started to include Indigenous communities into the learning phase of the Global Assembly. And so a question that really stuck out for me there was, well, if we get trapped in using language models to help us design and prepare processes, then to what extent are we just confining ourselves to the status quo as it exists today? Because it is trained on existing data, it might not come up with these kinds of new and novel ideas. So yeah, definitely there are many ways in which we need to be closely aware of the existing nature of the systems, so that we can actually use them in ways that make sense rather than ways that could actually hold us back and constrain us, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Tim's followed up there saying that he agrees LLMs as one of the brainstorming tools, amongst others, can be very useful. Got a few more hands raised now. Patrick, thanks for waiting. Would you like to ask a question? Patrick? If not, in the meantime, we've got Liz patiently waiting. Thanks, Liz. Have you got a question for the group?
It's an observation, really. Excuse me, I have a bad voice. I think there's a difference between designing participatory systems and scaling. And I think it would be helpful if we sort of divided those two into different areas, because you could use something that is designed and then scale it with AI, which is a completely different set of challenges, to actually helping you design a process where the bias questions come in. Essentially, if you've set your framework and then you were just trying to maximize the participation or maximize the number of parties that can go through a process, you have different challenges. I think the challenge about facilitation, as opposed to gathering information and turning it into a consensus position, are different questions. And I think it would be better, as we proceed with this conversation, to actually look at it as a flow, so we can see the points of intervention and then talk about where the technology can be applied or chosen, rather than trying to kind of deal with all of those things at the same time, because they have very different characteristics. So some of the challenges are about how to have a conversation, and then the choices that you can make within a process. And I think we need to be clear that all technology has an inbuilt bias, from Microsoft through to Google or whatever. The relationship between the makers of that technology and the users of that technology, and the power imbalance in that, I think, is really important when you start to talk about it in relation to deliberative processes. Because if it's a closed box and it's not an open source bit of kit, then you have a very different set of relationships. And I think we need to think at that level of sophistication rather than just kit, because the kit itself, it's useful, it's a tool, but actually there's a power relationship inherent in that. So I've just thrown a lot of stuff at you, Sammy, but I think you're getting it because there's a few nods in there. So
Yeah, thank you very much for that distinction between designing and scaling. And just on the last point, I'm glad that you also brought up the open source question. That was actually something that I didn't fit into my presentation, but something that I did write about in my paper, in my dissertation, actually. And yeah, I think that's an important aspect to this. And I was starting to allude to it at the end when I was talking about the importance of collaboration within the field, within this area. So how can we, open source is a key dimension to that, I think. Finding ways in which we can share best practices, where the models can be open source and scrutinizable. And yeah, I think that's a very important dimension that we should keep in mind and try to use open source models in deliberative processes as much as we can.
Interesting. Lots of more chats that we were talking about, anyone who's got first-hand experience with Citizens Assemblies, and we've got a really good mix here. There's some new networks going on, glowcan.org, and a more local, close to home to East London with Newham's Assemblies. But yeah, I mean, I guess, Sammy, during your research, during your project, out of the 17, if you could choose like the top 3 that you think are the most important or the most needed currently, in terms of which of the AI features are best to implement, if you had to choose and prioritize, which 3 would those be that would really enhance democracy?
I think that when I was structuring my PowerPoint, I kind of subconsciously did that. I think when I explored AI translation, facilitation, and aggregation at the start, I think they were the 3 that I was thinking about having the biggest potentiality here, particularly in terms of scalability and increased efficiency of citizens assemblies.
Yeah,
An
so-
interest. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it just this point around scalability, because yeah, during my research, I saw a lot of this as well, and obviously like Landemoore's work, and that tends to be the initial assumption or application for this new technology in AI, right? But then, you know, does more mean better? And you know, the turnover rates are already, you know, what they are in general. So is that really the direction we should be going in, or like quantity over quality of the actual debate? We have representative politics already. So if we had more people like us, rather than a single elected representative, you know, debating our case or trusting the outcomes of what's deliberated, do we really need, you know, hundreds of thousands more people involved? And then who was it? I think in the last week's discussion, someone from Sortition, Ben, was saying how difficult it is to even recruit people into these processes anyway. So we might have the technology to be able to scale and, you know, have the capacity for that huge amount of participation, but then there's not even a demand. But there's a couple more hands raised, and if you've got any comments, I'll just move on with Anna. She's got a hand up. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you. Well, just to say that was a really great presentation and research. So thanks so much, Sammy. It's incredibly helpful. I don't know if it's a question, and that's why I was hesitant to, but I'm really tempted to make a comment on the points you've made on scaling versus quality, and thinking that in addition to inclusiveness, another key indicator for the quality of this process is representativeness, not in terms of statistical representativeness. We know that citizens assemblies cannot have 3,000 people, but just being reflective of the diversity and the population. And a concern I've always had with tools like Polis, when they are presented as the one solution to involve everyone, is that what you mentioned already in your research and presentation, Sammy, about self-selection and just biasing who's representative. And we may have a lot of people, but a lot of them might just represent very specific views. So just how important in this process is this is. And then you also mentioned transparency, which again is crucial not only for citizens themselves in the assembly, but also for wider public scrutiny of these processes. So I think that's another key indicator. Maybe not a question, but just this, I think it's so important and helpful that your research brings this up. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I think the question of transparency is one that could have given more attention to in my presentation, and could definitely warrant more attention in the future. You know, how serious is it actually that these AI models that we would be integrating into our collective decision-making processes are inscrutable? Like how significant is that? I think that's something to think about for people to start deliberating on as well. And that also applies to the question that I was asking about, to what extent are we giving too much power? Could we give too much power to machine-generated ideas? This also seems like a question that, you know, we could actually, you know, practice what we're preaching in citizen assemblies and actually start deliberating on collectively and start to formulate ideas surrounding that. I don't know, but myself, but this the whole thing here is it could be a very interesting start applying deliberations to that. And yeah, I think what you're talking about, Bella, is a really interesting one. I think that this trade-off between scalability and maybe the internal quality of the process is something that really needs to be grappled with. And there are some ways. I didn't actually go into lots of detail in the presentation, but there are some ways in which we could think about hybrid possibilities here. So rather than foregoing scalability or fully pursuing scalability and at the cost of democratic quality, there are ways in which we could use we could start integrating AI facilitators in translation in hybrid format. So some groups could have facilitators, some groups and some languages might benefit from AI translation more than others. And in doing that, then you could actually start to increase scalability without incurring too much of a cost to the democratic quality of it. I'm not sure. That's an interesting kind of middle ground that is something that I've not really seen explored, but could be worth exploring more.
Definitely. Thanks so much. And Liz, we've got another.
Yeah, it was just a response to that. We've been looking at using, if I call it a human citizens assembly, but then using AI as an amplification. So you can get a kind of normalization process by having a human scale, but then you put it out to a wider community, which obviously we self-selected because they have to be online. But then you could actually contrast between the two and see what the differences are. So I think that's what I mean about looking at it as a process, not looking at it exclusively as a technology issue, because it's to do with where you deploy, not the technology of itself. It's where is the intervention. Sorry, I hope that made sense.
Thanks so much. Yeah, agreed. I mean, sounds like, yeah, hybrid and, you know, technology with a human in the loop is sort of the way forward. But, you know, you spoke about ethics at the end, Sammy, and again, you know, we've just had the AI Safety Summit last week, but a uniform agreed standard or set of ethics is still being drafted, you know, and to the point that even that OpenAI grant project was all about democratic inputs into AI. So it's like a democratic way to actually even decide now, and it's ongoing, how best to manage and regulate the implementation of AI. So it's really an ongoing loop. Got a few more questions coming in. Artem, thanks.
Thank you. I have a question to Sammy, but also to anyone else who has experience with like organizing citizen assemblies here. So, as far as I understand, the classical citizen assembly is done offline, like they did in France this year. But I think in the UK they also usually done offline. Am I right? I don't know. But if it can be done in a hybrid mode, like something online, then what do you think would be the best channel for that? Do you think it should be done like through the website or through some messenger? Like, I'm just interested in this, like this technical implementation of like using AI in citizen assemblies. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, since COVID, there was like, or during COVID at least, there was like a transition towards moving citizen assemblies online. And yeah, I know like at least in Scotland there was a citizen assembly that was yeah, done mediated via Zoom, and also I think the Global Citizen Assembly maybe used them at least quite a bit. I hope that's answering the question. I'm not actually that sure. There might be other people who have better ideas on this than me.
I mean, yeah, my research this summer, Collect Intelligence, I did a hybrid model of this debate or discussion, and it was in person. So everyone was in person, but then using devices to use the Polis platform to then aggregate everything that arose from the discussion. So we'd have that experience of being in the room, hearing everyone, etc. But then the aggregation and summarization was able to be captured by the Polis platform. So that was a sort of hybrid format. And yeah, I'm not sure with the Global Assembly, for example. I think there were some people on here who worked on that, and Sammy, you said you did a case study. How much devices or technology was used by participants in that, apart from translation? You know, like were people uploading or inputting their statements and thoughts onto some online aggregator, or it was like still very much a human collecting all of those inputs? So
it's just that Polis doesn't have a language model yet. You know, like Polis is not AI powered tool, so I'm just curious, like how it could work with AI.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, Polis is a good way of aggregating and getting the and actually there is some sentiment analysis on there, because people are like sorting the questions and statements. But then obviously, yeah, with LLMs and the generative AI side of things, where we can start suggesting and producing comments and summarizations, yeah, that's going to be another piece. There's some comments in the chat. There's also hybrid and only online, driven by COVID. Patty mentioned that we in Engage Britain did online citizen assemblies, and to combat digital exclusion, yeah, they had to provide the tech for people to participate. Yeah, exactly. Because again, you know, there is a digital divide. We can't presume that everyone has these devices at home, but if we're all coming together in the room at an organized event, hopefully the devices can be provided there. Francis, did you have your hand up to say anything else live, or did you already write it in the chat box? Because your hand is raised, so yeah, feel free to speak now. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I had a question. I'm not skipping the queue, am I?
Oh no, you're next in the queue. Thank you.
So I was wondering, you mentioned a few times around a human in the loop, and I guess I was wondering what you meant by that in this case, and like sort of what way you would see this person being coming in. I guess I'm thinking there's a lot of knowledge about systems assemblies, but also about AI, and there's not necessarily always many people who have both. And I guess you probably need to have some understanding of both in order to understand both the bias and how that might impact things. So I guess I was just wondering if you had any thoughts around what you meant when you're saying about having a human to sort of safeguard against the issues with AI.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of clarity surrounding what I was meaning in relation to that in the presentation. So the idea is that it can vary across the specific application that we're talking about. So for example, for AI aggregation, the best way I think to keep human oversight, human in the loop, is actually through integrating the aggregation back into the Citizens Assembly, so they can look at it and question it and challenge it and see if there's any errors that maybe have popped up. But then there are other ways in which, for different applications, it might fall on, it could fall on the responsibility of people working within the Citizens Assembly process, like the assembly staff, maybe to do some evaluation of the output from the AI model. So if we're thinking about using it more in terms of like the learning phase, for example, then it might be that there's like a group of researchers who are able to look at it and analyze it a bit, and to check its quality. So I think it depends quite a lot on the specific application that we're talking about. And then within each of them, there are interesting questions that arise, like with what I was saying there about keeping a human in the loop within the learning phase. That's giving a lot of power and a lot of influence to the people who are doing that checking, that verification. So yeah, it's not something I have like a brilliant solution to, but I think that's the kind of idea that I was trying to refer to.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for the question. Tim, you got raise your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, for time. I felt as we ran the Citizens Jury last week around the AI Safety Summit on AI and kind of using some of those tools, it might be useful to play in the message from the 11 participants we had there, which was really around always starting from what are the values we want to achieve rather than from the technology. And I think applying that to this, and I think your framework, Sammy, provides a lot of the tools for doing this, of saying what are the specific problems we want to solve in any case, rather than being led by the technology is kind of interesting to play with. Because I think also once we articulate the value, what, do we need scale? Do we need broader brainstorming? Do we need more accessible materials? What's the goal we want to achieve first? And then AI alongside other interventions in our toolbox kind of being weighed up equally, because I think there is always that temptation with new technologies for us to leap on them and use them when we've got existing tools for that job that deliver the same change without, I think, some of the quite significant concerns about both LLMs, biases, and problems in them, that some of which are fairly fundamental to the way the technology works, and some of the ethical issues that are also raised around this being trained on copyright materials and potentially based on theft of large amounts of material to do that for some people is a big ethical concern, like some of our participants concerned about even playing with tools that are based on that.
Thanks so much, Tim. Then that's super interesting. So did you mention you were at the summit last week? And talk about values. That's a huge key, like, elephant in the room, I find sometimes, because we don't have a necessarily agreed set of values to strive or aim towards. We live in a very sort of disciplinary, regulatory, punishment-based system, rather than looking towards values in terms of good principles to either live or operate. Off the top of our heads, what sort of values driven operations could we could we make AI ethics center around, I guess truth, honesty, fairness, equality, anymore? Just kind of those are the main ones. But yeah, thanks Tim for your thoughts and comments there. But and if there's any more information, Tim, on the work you've done last week, please share in the chat. Thanks so much. Great, there's a link there now, connectedbydata.org. There's another comment by Anna in the chat. Sammy's framework, I think, draws on these principles or similar from democratic theory, but a reminder of standards principles for deliberative democracy. The OECDs are always helpful ones to draw from. Right, yeah, because the OECD had this Citizens Assembly participation toolbox, and that was just before COVID, wasn't it? So just the peak of the deliberative wave that was unfortunately stalled because of the pandemic. But in Europe, I think they probably carried on, haven't they? I think it's just the UK that's falling behind. Am I being biased? Liz, have you got?
Yeah, just in relation to the AI and ethics, there's a whole subculture being built within the AI kind of facing community to look at ethics and governance frameworks within the companies. And actually, those kind of questions around outcomes is a subset of that. There is the process, as you're talking about, stealing lots of stuff and then repackaging it as your innovation. There are challenges around how the oversight works internally, as well as the what's produced at the end. So again, we need to look at it as a process flow. How does AI get generated as a technology? How does it get evaluated? Once it exists, can we get into the box and find out what's in there? And then how is it applied in terms of, does it meet our needs, our value needs, as well as our operational needs? Sorry, coughing.
Yeah, coming into winter now. Get your flu jabs, everyone. Yeah, thanks so much. There's so many interesting comments and questions and thoughts. And yeah, again, just avenues of further research, but things to keep in mind, to be wary of. And again, it's great to be thinking about all of these things now at such an early stage. There's a few more things in the chat, but otherwise we are over time. So thank you so much for everyone who've stayed on, and thank you so much for all your questions, for your attention, and for your engagement in the chat or otherwise and live in the discussion room here. But please keep in touch. The WhatsApp group link is in the chat. James have just posted it. And also, if anyone wants to drop in their LinkedIn profiles, please share. We can all stay connected. And please share the WhatsApp chat link with anyone who you think would be interested. But otherwise, Sammy, thank you so much, and congratulations for getting a distinction with your project as well, and being able to share it with us today in such depth and detail. So close after your result. I hope you've got some relaxing. You've got a relaxing trip coming up. To take a breather.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Belle, for hosting it, and for everyone. That was a really great conversation, and I've shared my email with James, and I'm very happy to keep collaborating and discussing this with people. So do feel free to reach out, and we can keep chatting.
Brilliant, thanks so much. And the references at the end of your slides, we'll see whether we can share the slides or just the reference page at least with the community straight after. But great, well, thank you so much, everyone. If there are any further questions, please just maybe put it in the WhatsApp group. This is not the end, this is only the beginning. And next week, we've got Jeremy from Embeddables, a democracy startup based in New York, actually, speaking with us next Thursday. And if anyone is actually further interested in the AI governance side of things, tomorrow there is an event which I'm hosting, participating in with One World Trust, and I'll just pop that in the chat soon as well. But otherwise, James, is there any other closing comments?
No, not really. Thanks everybody for coming, as Isabella's already said, and thank you, Sammy, so much. I've just popped in some links there in the chat, some stuff on Anti-Party, Isabella's outfit, and some joining information if you're interested in the UK Democracy Network. Many of you are already members, but if you're interested in staying up to date on the latest news and funding and jobs and all the good stuff, if you're working on democracy in the UK, then I highly recommend you joining our growing community. And yeah, as Bella said, there is the WhatsApp group link up there. And I'll be sending around another feedback form in about half an hour. We're really interested to see whether or not you think these are useful and we should continue them and so on. And yeah, really, really excited to see how much engagement we've had with these. This is our third session with these sessions. Yeah, so thanks so much.
Really enjoyed. See you next week. See you soon, and let's keep the discussion going. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all.